Alright, time for some more illogic. Last time we went over a Week 5 match against Fish in his Cleveland cast forms. Please go check out that video first if you've not done so already. So we went over the team builder and the battle in which, spoiler alert, the Buffalo Bouffalant snagged a 5-0 victory off the back of a 4 KO performance from Marowak. That'll bring our record up to 4-1 in a 3-way tie for second in the league with a plus 14 differential. This time we're facing off against Elfowls and his 5-0 Newport Noctowls. Timestamps are in the description. Jimmy joined the league in our Season 7 Monotype League and was one of 2 new coaches to make the playoffs that season. It was a weird format, but Jimmy showed his true talent in Season 8, running with an incredibly successful team including a Heatran Tangrowth core and a terrifying Barraskewda. He finished 7-1 in the regular season, his only loss coming to your Bouffalant, in one of the better matches of the season. Thank you to Nidoking for being such a good matchup against him. And then mowed through the playoffs too, copying our Noivern set that we'd used against Chad in the semifinals by putting it onto Crobat in the finals and destroying Chad with that bulky taunt set to take the Season 8 championship, handing Chad his only loss of that season and giving himself his first title. And then in Season 9, the Bouffalant paired up with the Noctowls in the playoffs, the Multi-Battle League, to defeat the Wobbuffets and the Burbs before winning that season's finals against the Close Combat Club and Akron Agrons. It was an absolute blast working with him, winning all 3 times we paired up with him and going 1-1 against him, utilizing his Weavile, Salamence, and Gastrodon, among others. Back in a regular draft season, and his performance has not slowed down a bit, off to yet another undefeated start in with his low tiers after securing the 12th overall pick. I guess it's up to us to beat him again, especially because it is imperative he does not win a 3rd consecutive title, as that honor currently belongs to only the Bouffalant in our Seasons 2, 3, and 4 titles, as well as to break his undefeated season, an honor once again that belongs only to the Season 4 Bouffalant. Okay, enough bragging about myself and my opponent. Well, almost. I'd like to give a shout out to Elfowls for being the only other coach who is currently doing videos for his matches as well. Show him lots of love on his videos too. They took a whole lot, they look so much cleaner than mine do. And the analysis is a great compliment to those two if you're looking to expand your Pokemon knowledge in relation to draft leagues. This is the only other player that is at this moment on my level right now in the draft league. We'll see what potentially happens after this season. His insight is wonderful. It's enjoyable. Definitely check out his channel too down in the description. Okay, I think we're ready to talk about his very scary undefeated squad now. We've got former Bouffalant legend Noivern at the top of the speed tiers, followed by and often outsped by the Alolan Raichu, and then Thievul, Kangaskhan, which is something I very much thought I'd be getting for quite a while in my original planning. The same is actually true of the Blaziken as well, and then his first round pick of Decidueye, then Lapras, Berserker, Mudsdale, Aromatisse, and the electric terrain setter Pincurchin. Wow, what a scary squad. You definitely know that from how many mons he got that I wanted to. Even besides, though, we saw Decidueye sweep a previously undefeated team, Mudsdale get a dumb amount of KOs, even passively, through things like Rocks and Toxic while walling anything and everything. And that electric terrain core making me think we need to seriously rethink and re-tier every single small core combination like that, especially after what we just did with Arctovish after last season. Even his tier 20s have seemed solid, with Berserker coming against the Wobbuffets and Thievul's damage output higher than I would have liked to see. The balance from the team is quite noteworthy, often stalling out on positioning war early with things like Mudsdale and Noivern before breaking mid-game with things like Blaziken and Pincurchin, then cleaning up late with Raichu and Decidueye able to fill in throughout the game. I'm not saying those are the 6 scariest, but, well, let's take a look at what I expect. Or more importantly, let's start with what I don't. I give a little praise to Thievul, but its damage is very reliant on stakeout, and I'm not sure it can afford to bring it. Unless I've got Mesprit in, Thievul will not be finding many opportunities to take advantage of the squad, even with Burning Jealousy as very fun coverage. Berserker isn't bad. Those boosted steel moves are actually pretty tough for me to resist, especially when it can U-turn out pretty freely. But without a specific counter matchup in this matchup like he had against Steve's Piloswine, I'm not the most concerned. Lapras is pretty weird. The mons it outspeeds it hits super hard, as well as Aerodactyl, but it really gets slapped around by basically my whole team. Even with Freeze Dry coverage and Water Absorb for my 2 water types, I don't know if it's got the ability to hang with his other options. I love Kangaskhan, really. I love Kangaskhan and wish I could have found a spot for it myself, but I'm not sure it's going to be the play. If it comes, it should probably be a defensive wish set, but I wonder if he can afford to do that with the ridiculous amount of offense I've been bringing every week, with super effective boosted coverage from Passimian, Clawitzer, and Steelix, alongside everything else. The final pick's a little tough. I guess we'll say Aromatisse, though. I've got a good amount of poison and steel coverage I could bring, and Fairy offense isn't the most stellar against me, though we've also seen the success of Trick Room against me recently, too. And it's also his best dark resist, and can soak up neutral hits pretty well while being overall a better wish passer in the matchup. It's a mixed bag, but it's very passive too, and I don't know if he wants to play that kind of game against my squad. So, yes, I think those top 6 mons I mentioned previously will come. Noivern has a ton of answers on my team, but Frisk plus U-turn and those stabs, plus longevity with Roost, and maybe most importantly Defog, makes it a pain in my side. The early game Noivern in particular is something I don't want to deal with. Jimmy, like me, has often let Noivern go down early, but also like me, he sees the value it provides to the team regardless, often getting a hit off and scouting multiple items and maybe something like a defog too before going down, provides a fair share in any matchup it's in. Blaziken was a mon I really ended up wanting before having to settle for Passimian, though to be fair, Passimian has fulfilled its role quite well, quite admirably. I've been fearing the fighting types all season, and Blaziken is definitely a strong one. Coverage and setups on both sides, so I don't know which one is coming, plus agility to further the punishment potentially too. It's not a recipe for my success. Flare Blitz in close combat can chunk my sturdiest resists, and what would ordinarily be a middling speed stat is quite impressive in this league, tying with Mesprit and Passimian to make for a very awkward time with EVing. Mudsdale's next. Wow, has he used this one quite well. Tanks hits for days, lays down rocks and toxic, and then comes in when needed later as an opportune sack or to get off a free, surprisingly strong hit. Definitely one of the mons I've been impressed with the most this season. Decidueye is his first round pick, but has actually only made an appearance in 2 matches so far, most recently with a Swords Dance sweep against a previously undefeated team. That means we haven't actually seen much from it, a possible defogger or special attack or 2 with enough stats all the way around to fulfill literally any role you need to fill. I know Elfals is creative enough to get the right Decidueye set for this week, though the only thing I know for sure is that it absolutely needs to run U-turn this week, and that isn't exactly tough to fit in on any set. Finally, the Electric Surge and Surge Surfer duo of Pincurchin and Raichu-Alola. Man, electric moves are so good and so strong in electric terrain, let alone Rising Voltage, which chunks even resists for way too much, let alone backed up with Scald and Surf for my 2 ground types, which also don't like getting hits from things like Decidueye and Blaziken. That's a big part of his game plan, I believe, pressuring those ground types to ensure those electric types can break through. Seriously, what am I supposed to do about that? Well, not bringing Clang is going to be a good start, who doesn't resist electric, nor either of Blaziken stabs, while letting Decidueye do what it wants. Magnet Rise is very funny for Mudsdale, but strangely enough, he doesn't have to stay in against Clang, so a lot of good it does there. Frostlass also actually struggles quite mightily, falling to the faster mons plus Shadow Sneak priority without being able to get particularly strong moves fired back, though there are some interesting statuses and things it could throw around to disrupt his team strat, and Ice is actually really good coverage overall against his team. Though I am loath to do so after praising it just a little bit ago, and because Jimmy had it in Season 8, I will not be bringing Passimian. The monkey has some use for sure, but it is tough to commit to. Outsped and blown up by Noivern and Raichu, Mudsdale and Aromatisse mostly tanking everything I've got. Even Colbur Decidueye is an easy answer. It's rare to have this many things that Passimian matches up poorly against, but here we are. Clawitzer is very intriguing, one of the few times I could potentially bring Terrain Pulse with the electric terrain, Pincurchin looming while beating his ground type pretty easily too, but I didn't feel fully comfortable with it this time. It still kind of just loses to the electric types, outsped by a lot of his team like Decidueye, Noivern that still threaten it. And he has a couple of potential walls to take the hit he needs pretty well too. Finally, Tentacruel looks okay, but doesn't quite do what he needed to do again. It got super pressured, particularly by the electric duo, and it's not like it's exactly going to out-trade a Decidueye, or actually beat a Lapras, which is looking a little more scary, so ultimately it seemed like a little bit of a sus pick. Maybe a couple of surprises on the team here this time, both Mon-wise and moveset-wise. So let's start with the straightforward air attacks. Who's got Boots, 3 attacks, plus Defog. I could fit Defog on my other option this week, but decided I really couldn't find the space. And without Tentacruel, I thought this might be the best way to handle problematic hazards. I'm looking at that Mudsdale in particular. Otherwise, I really couldn't afford to give up any other move slots for something like Roost. Earthquake hits the Electric, Stool Wing beat the Decidueye, and Stone Edge the Lapras and Noivern, the latter of which is outsped thanks to the speed investment. He doesn't have too many options to deal with this, actually, limited to Scarfers, Raichu and Electric Terrain, chipping into Shadow Sneak range, and potentially Mudsdale as a defensive wall, which sounds like a lot, but may actually be quite maneuverable. Let's move on then to Steelix, who also has a somewhat straightforward set and may lead you to believe I was lying to you, but Stabs, Toxic, and Protect, while not revolutionary, is pretty necessary. This is a good Raichu check for sure, who needs to hit either a Surf or a Focus Blast to get past me. The Pincurchin needs Scald and is also outsped. The Noivern, who needs Flamethrower, Focus Blast, and Aromatisse, which cannot hit me. Yeah, he has coverage options. Yes, they tend to be special. but that's why I'm foregoing the big physical defense and body press this week for the problematic aspects, which are basically all special. Toxic on this in particular is great too for how it can bait in Mudsdale, as well as maybe Decidueye and his Heal Bell Mon of Aromatisse hates being in against Heavy Slam Steelix. Sturdy with lefties and Protect again just makes sense, and Protect is also nice to have for stalling out the electric terrain if needed, or scout out a choice option if I'm convinced that's what he's going to bring. I would love to, for example, say find he has a Scarf on something for Aerodactyl early, because I could potentially take advantage of that with, say, I don't know, this Mesprit, which does actually have Trick Room. You may have noticed a couple of lower tier mons I'm bringing this week with low speed stats, in addition to the aforementioned Steelix. My desire to bring all those kind of naturally led to the possibility of bringing a Trick Room Mesprit to facilitate that. The Noctowls do have some slow speed stats. Pitcurchin stands out as the biggest barrier to the strat, with the electric and water coverage and the lowest speed in the matchup, alongside Mudsdale, who's only got base 35 speed and surprising power. But if we can, say, pressure the Mudsdale low, and then be able to set up a sub on something or take a hit against the Pincurchin, we should actually be in business. I'm just imagining being able to have a Trick Room up against him when he's got, say, Blaziken, Noivern, and Decidueye left. Anyways, we've got a quiet nature to ensure Ice Beam and Psychic can at least chunk whatever I'm looking to hit with Mesprit, an effective attacker by its own merit thanks to that power and coverage to let me OHKO Noivern and Blaziken while dealing a ton to Decidueye and Mudsdale among others. U-turn is obvious too, of course, to potentially get those Trick Room attackers in if that's where I needed to go. Cassib Berry is there too for the Decidueye ghost moves, meaning I could maybe take pitiful damage from a Sneak or a Poltergeist, and then make a Poltergeist useless on the follow-up. Pretty ideal scenario, but not the most far-fetched. I guess it's a bit odd to be underspeeding the Decidueye naturally, and this was something I wasn't really sure of, but I think it's fine to commit at least a little bit to the wacky strat. On the other hand, of course, is the other speed complement to Aerodactyl with the Rotom-Frost, who is our Scarfer this time with a very spammable Blizzard that should do at least half to most of his team should it hit. Volt Switch is very easy too, aside from the Mudsdale, of course, which is hit by the Blizzard, which is very important. Thunderbolt to hit the Lapras harder in particular is a mon I actually struggle a little bit to hit with, given my team composition. And I've got the Trixie Sucker Punch in the last slot. Yeah, Scarf Sucker Punch, because despite my speed, Raichu-Alola is going to be the fastest thing on the field when it comes out. Without Focus Blast hitting it, at least it cannot one hit KO me, so potentially 2 Sucker Punches could ruin an endgame sweep, or maybe I got chipped onto Raichu earlier and this brings it down. The other use is, of course, a low Decidueye, where I should be able to bring it down to after a, say, Mesprit Ice Beam into Sucker Punch range, and then we can even outspeed the Shadow Sneak. It's kind of cool. We also outspeed +1 Blaziken with this set, which I think is a real possibility to come, so I think I like the bring. Speaking of, I'm very excited to announce the return of Guzzlord with 4 attacks and a Chople again, though the Chople was kind of an afterthought to make sure Blaziken can't just rampage through the team unhindered. That should totally be fine, max Spadef, because of all that aforementioned special coverage we've got to deal with, because this is a pretty nice wall to a few of his special threats that, you guessed it, may just be running fight coverage to hit me a little harder. We're talking Focus Blast, and of course the close combat, which we may actually still survive too, depending on investments and natures and such. Earthquake for the electrics just makes a lot of sense. Stab knockoff, of course, backed by Brave Nature with max attack investment. Brave does still let me outspeed the Mudsdale normally, though again it's kind of tough to decide on speeds with Trick Room because you want to take advantage of it properly, but you don't want to rely on it to outspeed things. I think this was a decent compromise. It also lets me fire off Draco Meteors pretty freely too, because we're not lowering our special attack. The last slot probably should have been Heavy Slam again here, but I settled with Outrage in case I wanted a little bit more power behind one of my last moves. I'm constantly surprised by Guzzlord's calcs, so this could be a lot of fun. Along with my last team member whose calcs I've also raved about, Marowak. Yeah, kind of weird to have only 2 attacks on it, but Earthquake and Knockoff is about all I need, aside from maybe Rock coverage for Noivern. Sub is great for the switches Marowak forces, or for just selling things out, and Protect should be apparent too for the scouting it does along with running out electric terrain. The other cool benefit of it is the potential to stall out Trick Room if needed too. I see a world where Pincurchin tries to take advantage of a turn or 2 of Trick Room after a KO, and I can take advantage of that by protecting so I can outspeed it again outside of Trick Room. Actually, I've got some speed investment so I can function well outside of the Trick Room with enough speed to outspeed 8 speed Lapras, as again, I want some good answers to that thing in case it comes. If it's offensive, take it out in Trick Room. If it's bulky, I outspeed and 2-hit KO with Earthquake. Speaking of funny calcs, did you know that Decidueye actually gets 2-hit KO'd by Earthquake? And that is a resist. When with only that and Noivern as apparent answers to my Earthquakes, this could potentially get real nasty real fast. Let's see if Guzzlord and Marowak can keep up the momentum from their debuts in what should be the Bouffalant's biggest challenge yet. Okay, nice. No Blaziken, and Aromatisse is in its place instead. I am happy that close combat won't be going burr, and also happy to see no Lapras, which this team actually would have struggled against. but Aromatease's presence also implies a bit of an annoying Heal Bell Wish game while lessening the value of Trick Room even more. Looking around, Blizzard is pretty free to spam, Steelix looks ungodly good, I wish I had put Heavy Slam on that Guzzlord too, and Arrow should have a great time, especially once Mudsdale and or Raichu goes down. Okay, lead matchup. Mudsdale and Noivern are the usual leads from him, I believe, and Noivern's Frisk is probably the most annoying part of this. Leading Rotom and clicking Blizzard is funny, but he could see that Choice Scarf pretty easily with Noivern too, so I'm going to go with my neutral play of Steelix, even if I'm not going to be bringing rocks this week. Good luck to Alpha Owls. The Pincurchin lead. Interesting. That is definitely unexpected, I would say, but no complaints here. Unless he snags the turn 1 burn. That would be very not good, I think. Can I really risk doing anything else, though? I need a little information on this, and I should be 2-KOing all the time thanks to my investment. I think we should just go for the EQ, which will, of course, do well over half, indicating some HP investment in the Scald. Afterwards, no burn. Whew, thank goodness. And it didn't do specs damage either. It's somewhere in between, I think. Some special attack investment, but not too much, so I'm going to guess it's more of a Spadef set. That's pretty good to know, especially because we got some health back compared to him. There's absolutely zero chance he sacks this Pincurchin off right here and now, so this should be incredibly free Toxic, and that will go right into the Mudsdale. Let's see it hit. Thank you very much. I really need to get this thing chipped down ASAP and try my best to prevent the Aromatisse, Heal Bell, and Wish support. That won't be the easiest, but should actually be decently manageable. So what's going to be next? By far the two most likely options are going to be Stealth Rock and EQ, and Stealth Rock seems much more likely to me. My Defogger does not like Stamina Mudsdale, so I'm left with Mesprit or Rotom. I would like to keep Mesprit healthy to take advantage of the Cassib Berry if possible, but Rotom would take a bunch from rocks if that were to go up. Plus it has a little bit more power on its Ice move. So I'll just go to Rotom, as he does indeed set rocks. Good call there. So Blizzard is very spammable, but it's also pretty likely he'll swap out, as toxic damage would rack up if he stayed in, plus the obvious threat of Blizzard. Can I risk that? I think I could have, but we are at least going to see the Blizzard damage go onto the Aromatisse, which is still valuable. 26%? That's max Spadef. Wow, yeah, that's basically a resist to Blizzard, isn't it? Clearing Mudsdale becomes that much more valuable for opening up Volt Switch, with Aromatisse going down, introducing Blizzard as the spammable option instead. Steelix, of course, will be the good switch, as he is going to protect, probably reasonably expecting a Volt Switch out as a way to get some more lefties recovery himself. I do threaten Heavy Slam now, which I don't think I can afford to miss out on doing, as Mudsdale eats it up for approximately negative damage, and we're going to see just how much it's going to be here. 8. That is, oh my goodness. Toxic, though, will ensure that it cannot stay in too long, though it is negated on the first turn by lefties. I may as well protect the turn. I assume Mudsdale doesn't have that much it wants to do here aside from EQ, so I can get a little bit more damage off. Protect does go off into the Body Press. Ooh, that is not great. My fighting weaknesses are a bit plentiful, and while I enjoyed not being vulnerable to Blaziken, I am to +1 defense Mudsdale. This is a really good mon, honestly. Well, we got at least a couple of different ideas of what to do. I absolutely need to keep this healthy, though, first and foremost, to combat multiple mons of his. So I'm going to need to swap into something that can threaten this while not being weak to Body Press. And as you may be able to tell, I really only have one option. It is Mesprit, but it's a great swap by Alpha Owls into Decidueye. That makes a lot of sense, and I wouldn't be clicking Heavy Slam or Toxic on that turn either. And I may be going into my only fighting resist after seeing the Body Press. It just feels like I should have thought about this one a little bit longer, but ultimately I don't have an issue with it. I think he just played it very well. So now what? He's got exactly what he wants out of Mesprit. He wanted to keep it I want to keep it healthy for Trick Room, but I don't know if I can here. It's a slow Mesprit too, and his team is even slower aside from, of course, this. This is now in a perfect position to do a good bit of damage. Trick Room is not good. His main pivots right now are going to be the very slow Mudsdale and Aromatisse. Even if I have Trick Room, it's really not worth it. So I guess I can hope he goes for a ghost move here. It seems decently likely. I don't exactly have the best way to scout for maybe U-turn, except for, say, Steelix. But again, I cannot let that get chunked by something like a grass move, or let him set up, say, a Swords Dance or something. This is really tough. I think I have to just stay in and try to get damage off on this. Maybe put it in range of Marowak Earthquake or a Sucker Punch or something like that. I think my only real option is going to be clicking Ice Beam. This really is making me wish that I wasn't Trick Room and had the negative speed on it, because this is just a bad situation. And he does even outspeed with a U-turn. Not the ghost move I was hoping for. It does a lot of damage to max HP Mesprit. That is choice banded damage, in fact. And he does, of course, go into the Aromatisse to absorb as well. This is showing maybe a little bit of a flaw in the team prep start right now. There really isn't anything that is too terribly concerning yet, but this may be a bit of a sign for what's been going on here, yeah? Mesprit can be low, but if rocks remain off the field, I actually still tank a Banded Shadow Sneak because my berry's intact, funnily enough. So maybe I could then Trick Room up for Guzzlord, so it could have a little bit of use later, potentially. For now, I need to go into Steelix right away against this thing, as he will, in fact, reveal, unfortunately, the Heal Bell, and that isn't ideal, even a little bit. We can work around it. Potentially, we're going to, of course, see the Protect for Lefty's recovery as I try to wear down something with Toxic. This should be where he goes into Mudsdale, correct? Yes, and that's why this time I click Toxic again. Excellent. Get that back onto the Pack Horse. Good, good, good. This is really tough to get quite right, though, because of that Heal Bell, because of the threat of Wish. And again, this Steelix is just super pressured. Nothing to do but Protect to Scout, I guess. Noivern switch. That's kind of interesting. That makes decent sense. It's not like I was going to Toxic Heavy Slam that turn either. I'm not sure what he wants to do here, but I have a good feeling it isn't going to be setting anything up. So I will Protect on the incoming Flamethrower, which is his coverage move of choice against the Steelix and Steel types and such in general. That would be a lot of damage, though. I don't want to go into Steelix, so maybe I could go into something else. I wanted to be a little aggressive here, maybe force in Mudsdale a little more often. So I decided to go into Aerodactyl. Draco doesn't even KO unless it specs, and if he's locked into Flamethrower, Aero is immune to Rock Strip 2, and it'll only take about a quarter here from Noivern. This is an important turn, too, because I kind of messed up my calcs a little bit. I was going between specs and other sets a little bit. I just kind of missed which one I figured out the damage was from. I thought, oh, okay, this is it. This is the calc that has it, and I kind of missed if it was the specs one or the other one. It's honestly kind of inexcusable, and we'll see how that could affect the future turns here, too, maybe even in the not-so-distant future. Of course, I thought he may be something like Scarf as well, so I didn't think he could stay in either way, and thought I could just go ahead and defog the rocks away on the switch back into Mudsdale. A fair play from him for sure. And now I think I may have an opportunity to make a play. I don't think he's going to be clicking any particularly strong moves this turn, though I guess that depends how you define Stealth Rock, because it sure seems like that would be the play for him. Body Press is possible too. It's pretty neutral and good against just about everything I've got, with only Mesprit as a real resist to it. But what I really want to do is take advantage of how low Mudsdale is starting to get with Poison wearing him down. He'll take another 16th next turn if he stays into set rocks, after that an 8th and less health. If what I want to do is potentially trade rocks and maybe some health off of something from Mudsdale, you know it would be nice to drop in pretty freely right now? Marowak, who of course is just in the perfect position to start pressing buttons against, oh, the double into Noivern. Looks like he had a very similar idea to me. Great double there from Jimmy, great double. This is, of course, the easiest Protect of my life, as we're going to see a Draco Meteor come in, of course. That makes a lot of sense. I teetered for a long time on this next turn's play as, yeah, this is where my earlier fumble with the calcs come into play. This is almost the same calc as Arrow, only specs KOs here. I think I messed up with what the default on Showdown was and the spec set, and again, kind of confusing which numbers I was seeing where, and just had in my mind, oh, this is the set that he has, and not really taking note of which set I just denoted it was. And that is a very bad mistake, because unfortunately my knockoff is not going to be connecting it to anything. Marowak just goes down without doing a thing. That is the big unfortunate. It means Noivern continues to come in for free. I have a lot less pressure against Aromatisse. Could you imagine how much this would be doing? That Aromatisse isn't physically bulky, it's special bulky, as well as maybe Pincurchin, which it outspeeds as well. If Noivern had gone down, Earthquake would have just mowed down his entire team. Remember the Decidueye calc and how funny that is? Marowak actually looked really good in this matchup, and I wish I had just gone into Steelix, even if I wasn't sure he was specs. Obviously hindsight, but the calc makes the hindsight pick less of an excuse and more of just a bad play. This is just super unfortunate. This is a really easy play, though, in the follow-up, obviously, into either Steelix or Rotom. I figured I could get something for free with Rotom, though, and here's a kind of another interesting conundrum. If I click Blizzard, I have a good chance to KO Noivern, 70% obviously if he stays in. It's just going to be super effective 4 times, but he doesn't know that I'm Scarf. Blizzard is pretty free too. except for that Aromatisse, which has healed just about all the way back up, and if he goes Aromatisse here while Blizzard, he gets to either wish himself back up or heal Bell up the Mudsdale, and the last thing I want right now is to give Aromatisse free turns. The absolute last thing I want to do is do that. So I'm actually going to make the play to Volt Switch. No chance Mudsdale comes in, and if he does, he'll have to make some more doubles to make it worth it. Unfortunately, he does stay in, and that means that while I do get a good bit of chip off on him, almost a third, it does mean that he now knows I am Scarf, and maybe more importantly, will allow his Noivern even more room to fire off Specs attack, whilst outspeeding most of my team. Steelix obviously takes -1 Dracos pretty comfortably, so that's not too bad at least. It's tough to say it was the wrong play either. Blizzard looks free aside from the Aromatisse, and if the number one thing I need to avoid is the Aromatisse coming in to heal itself and Mudsdale up, then I absolutely needed to make sure that it did not come in for free, which it can only do if I fire off the Blizzard into the Aromatisse switch or KO the Noivern. Of course, that Noivern has been ripping holes already anyways, and without him knowing Scarf, that looks like that was actually kind of a sack, which is very interesting, so maybe it would have been worth it to rid myself of the bat. Either way, we do at least have the momentum now. It didn't cost too much, well, and we did pay for it with the Marowak and the Scarf Rotom knowledge. Knowing he is for sure locked, though, he's probably going to Mudsdale this turn. I don't really have the best tools to take advantage of it now, though. A double to Marowak would have looked pretty clean at this point if that were still around. So the most damage we can do this turn is actually just going to be with an EQ, and if he does indeed swap into it, I'm correct. 21% is decent, everything considered. This should just be rocks for him, but just in case he's going for an attacking move, I will take the opportunity to swap into Mesprit. I've got to keep that momentum for sure, and rocks do in fact go up. Maybe Arrow would have been the better play there. I could defog immediately while Mudsdale got whittled down, but I also would have been pretty scared as to how much a +1 body press would be doing, or he could just keep flicking rocks to make sure they're up upon his death. With Mesprit 2, we get to make a good play because we actually correctly predict to swap out here into Aromatisse, which appeared to be a swap out the first time, and appropriately U-turn right out, meaning I'm just able to put Steelix down yet again, which will prevent him from clicking Heal Bell or Wish, which is, again, pretty perfect for me. The more often Mudsdale switches in and takes Toxic Chip, or just Chip from switching in on other things, the better. Sooner that we get rid of those pieces, the sooner we can start to attack the fragile yet powerful Electric Train Core, plus the Decidueye. Plus, of course, that Noivern, and it definitely feels like we're getting closer to that point, even closer on this next turn when we are going to get a big old Heavy Slam off into the Noivern, and we're going to bring it quite low, in range, in fact, of another Heavy Slam pretty comfortably there, too. We're obviously going to protect his Scout for what is coming out, and of course it makes a lot of sense that he's just going to go for Flamethrower, so this here is another big turn. I have the chance to KO this thing right here and now, right? I'm back up to full health thanks to lefties, and this Noivern has already rampaged through the team. A Heavy Slam KO here, while taking maybe 2/3 back, would be really nice. What's his answer? Mudsdale? I'd just protect on that and get back to half at least after TAOing this, and then protecting on that, and it would start to get close to EQ range again from there too. Can't swap in the Pincursion, I just KO that. So maybe I could save the Steelix to come in on Aromatisse again, but have we seen how valuable the Steelix is? It's crazy. It beats half his team right now. 2 of his members are Choice Select too, so Protect is invaluable scouting, and this is the last one I have Protect on. So what is it I really want to do this turn, and what do I want to do with Steelix? Ultimately, I don't want to pass up another opportunity to KO this Noivern. I've done that once before, and more chip on the Aromatisse would open up Guzzlord tremendously if I just take care of this and the Aromatisse. This and Guzzlord right now is the big duo core right now. Would have been amazing if we could have paired that with Marowak, and that was the whole point of the Trick Room team, but that's how it is. Guzzlord gets a lot more free reign if we can take out this and the Aromatisse, which this is specifically designed to beat. So what's going to be the best way to accomplish that? Aerodactyl actually scares Noivern out again, and it takes about 1/4 from Flamethrower. I don't know if I want to be Aerodactyl, though, to be swatted down at a Shadow Sneak range, because Decidueye is the biggest problem to this whole strat at this point. This was the biggest driving factor for me this turn in staying away from this, as well as my other assist, Guzzlord, as I was very worried about getting the Aromatisse switch in again, too, without Heavy Slam as a KOing option, so potential miss because of that. So one more time, we're staying away from the Aerodactyl this turn, because we don't want it to be swatted into Shadow Sneak range, and we're staying away from the Guzzlord because we want to stay out of free switch into Aromatisse, which we absolutely need to be taken down or much closer into range first because we don't have Heavy Slam. So I think probably this is going to be the best call. I'm just going to stay on and claim the KO with Heavy Slam at the cost of most of Steelix's health, which probably, I'm not sure if it's the right call. I really don't know even right now, but it does still beat most of his team afterwards. So we're just going to stay in and do that, unless, of course, we get burned by the Flamethrower. Yeah, I discussed whether or not this was the correct play, but to get punished on top of making a very difficult decision is just the worst. I called the game right here as the game deciding turn. That isn't to say there are more poor decisions in my end left to come, or good plays on his end that have led to this point or afterwards. It just seems that this was definitely the point of no return, where I didn't see a way to win anymore after this. This is such a big deal. Noivern surviving, Steelix unable to do enough to KO it or to really do much to anything anymore, and most importantly, Steelix is now unable to recover HP anymore with leftovers. Those are all incredibly big deals. Most importantly, the last of those is Steelix absolutely needed to be able to sit in front of multiple mons and heal up with Protect and Lefties to tank them better, especially if it means it could tank a Decidueye hit later potentially too if needed. Instead, Noivern is alive in front of Steelix, meaning I still have to switch something into another fire move. Steelix is chipped incredibly low, which I'd already accepted by staying in. It's just that Steelix's damage output is also neared for the rest of the match, and now Steelix will be capped out at a measly 30% health with every hit and switch into rocks, slowly chipping away at what I have left. This was a big deal of a turn. However much I try to minimize the impact of hacks in these videos, I cannot deny that this burn really turned the game quite a bit. Again, a very difficult decision to make, and to get punished on top of it is just the worst. Maybe I could have switched, but what if Aerodactyl had gotten burned? My fast mon with Defog that probably cannot K even Decidueye anymore? What if it had been Guzzlord, the even healthier mon that is also almost totally physical as well, and it'll do now, what, 10% to Aromatisse max? A burn on anything here would have been an awful blow, and forced yet another switch out, because a burn on the other two would have brought Aromatisse in for free. We're staying in and getting burned at least keeps the other two healthy enough to get revenge or get chip on something, but yeah, I cannot sugarcoat it. This burn really sucks. Maybe not as big as missing the specs earlier. I'm not sure which is more impactful, but this really sucks. I don't feel like I was particularly wrong about my in-game assessment of that. We're still playing to win, of course, or at least get as close as we can, so we're going to have to continue to make plays here. We're going to make the switch now into Aerodactyl that we absolutely have to make, and it really does suck. But of course another Flamethrower comes out here, and we are going to tank that relatively well, and thankfully no burn here. Spoiler, that's the last Flamethrower Scald we take for the rest of the match, so we can do a little bit of math as well. If we're not salty enough. I'm really trying not to be. It's just very, very unfortunate. So we had one Scald at the beginning that didn't burn, and we had 3 Flamethrowers here, one of which burned. The odds of none of those burning is 0.7 times 0.9 times 0.9, which equals a bit over half. 51% of chance that none of those burn. The odds were slightly in our favor, slightly better if we consider the third Flamethrower here wouldn't have even gone off if we'd code, which would bring it to a 56.7% chance of no burn between the first 3 burning moves. No use whining about it anymore, even if it does make me feel better. So we'll see what should be an obvious switch into Aromatisse. Go off into my dual Wing Beat, which does pretty close to half the remaining health. Though keep in mind leftovers as well as Protect. Stone Edge looks like it may have a chance to KO here. Looks like maybe a bad roll, though, especially with the ability to miss. Though it is a high crit chance move, too, we still have a chance to potentially get that back in our favor. I did expect a Wish on this Protect here, but it makes sense to get a little bit of chip. I don't mind clicking Stone Edge this turn, though, as Mudsdale comes in to take only 13% because that Pack Horse is an absolute monster. Would have been nice to defog that turn, actually, at some point, but I don't think I could really afford to give Aromatisse an opportunity to do anything. That was the whole point of the past several turns, and I'm actually probably more grateful that Mudsdale came in to take a little bit more chip instead of Aromatisse getting a chance to heal it up with a Wish, so I'll take it. My switch-ins are definitely getting more and more limited, but I think I like the idea of going into Steelix now. I've been staying away from the Steelix-Mudsdale matchup this whole time with the burn and how unlikely it would be for him to go to EQ here. Yeah, see there, there we go. It would be somewhat a safe move, and it was correct. Heavy Slam does even less to me than I did to Mudsdale, and Toxic is now starting to finally get back to ticking on it. I am actually outsped, and I could take a super effective hit, so I'm just going to Protect for a little bit of Toxic Chip. But instead, here comes the Pincurchin, the final very big play of the battle. I'm not sure what I thought he'd be going for here, but we can definitely tell that we're within range of KOing him with EQ, considering all that chip on him is from the first time we clicked Earthquake on turn 1. This is a little bit of a weird play when we look at it. We'll get into it just a little bit. Even at half damage from my Earthquake, it should still KO. We did 74% for half of that is 37, easily within range of Earthquake. Of course, that would be too easy, as would be recognizing Pincurchin's move pool containing Recover. So instead, I just stall a turn of Electric Terrain, but in exchange allow him to get Pincurchin up to incredibly healthy numbers, and that sucks. That really sucks. This may have actually been the last chance I had to get back into it by letting him off the hook here, and we'll go over what a KO here would have meant later, but for now it's just an easy opportunity for him here. Don't worry, we will go over this in detail at the end of the battle. We can at least nab a little bit of damage onto the Pincurchin here, but in exchange, you know what's going to happen. If I stay in to do that, 35%, say, we are of course going to go on to Scald. That is my best answer to the Electrics. That is my best answer to Aromatisse by far. It is down, even though it was burned, it wasn't going to handle them maybe that well, but we're already down 2 Mons, and we've got a very low Mesprit and a half-health Aerodactyl. It's really not looking all that good, but we're going to do what we can. So we will try, of course, for the Guzzlord next, and we know Knockoff just does a ton of damage. We've got the Aromatisse a little bit low, so there's a chance we could do something there potentially too, or maybe he's scared that we actually have coverage that we just didn't have because I'm not sure. Knockoff does way too much, though, to everything, and this is going to be proven true as he wisely sacks his Mudsdale at this point to at least net us 1 KO in this match. We'll take it, we guess, but here we see, of course, the surviving Noivern rearing its ugly head again. This is the easiest Draco Meteor from him. Imagine if we weren't burned and this was down. So I'm going to have to make the Mesprit sack as well. No choice here but to let it go down as Steelix is down, and the other members are super key for any semblance of hope. Speaking of, Aerodactyl will come in next, looking for the Revenge KO, of course. We're going to just click the dual Wing Beat. That just makes a lot of sense to me, I think. But Pincurchin tanks it relatively well. Earthquake would be pretty free here too, but I cannot let Raichu come in like this. Guzzlord does still tank its hits pretty easily, so we're just going to go into it right here. And of course that means that we're giving Pincurchin another free turn, which means of course it's going to recover again, and then we at least get to fire off another strong knockoff for, again, relatively free. Aromatisse is still around, but still, this one is instead going to go into the Noivern, who thankfully finally goes down after burning Steelix and threatening KOs on literally, I think, everything else. It's been just an absolute mess to deal with. Thank the Lord it's gone. We made a couple of misplays around it, and it's finally gone. We actually got 2 KOs this match. We'll absolutely take that. My last 2 Mons, aside from this, outspeeded as well, so this was the only opportunity Noivern could have to get in the entire match. So, unfortunately, this means he has yet another easy option to revenge KO me, not just the Aromatisse, but Choice Band Decidueye, who does not have Stab to hit me with, but potentially something much worse. He will, of course, U-turn out, doing an absurd amount of damage to this bulky boy, but I lived. Aromatisse is his choice. That makes a lot of sense, but 40%, look how much +1 knockoff does to resist with lots of physical bulk investment. That's kind of insane. That is actually pretty ridiculous. He's going to protect on this turn, and that's significant because electric terrain will expire this turn. I touched on it a little bit before with Pincurchin recovering on Steelix, and maybe a little bit more when I swapped out of Aerodactyl when I should have EQ'd, or could have EQ'd rather, but he's playing for that Raichu at the end as he rightfully should. That Raichu being able to outspeed the Aerodactyl is probably his best chance at winning at this point, especially because it also outspeeds the Rotom, which he knows is Scarfed. He's finding a myriad of opportunities for electric terrain to go back up, and we can tell pretty easily that it's due to Raichu being in the back. And at this point, he's actually just trying to sack the Pincurchin to get a free several turns for Raichu in the terrain. That said, Pincurchin will now switch in as the sacrificial lamb, of course, getting the electric surge up and surviving on 1! Was that fortunate or unfortunate? I don't think it mattered as much compared to earlier, but we at least have the benefit of actually snagging yet another KO here, and that's going to go into Aromatisse because he's going to save Pincurchin for one more ride later. Guzzlord actually accumulating three KOs, which is really funny. This is arguably garbage time that he's gotten all of them in. Not to mention that, of course, Raichu is going to come in with 3 turns left on Electric Terrain and more afterwards with Pincurchin. But Guzzlord, of course, goes down to Rising Voltage, and the game is just about over at this point. But hey, Guzzlord, we got something there. Our Mons were even until but a moment ago, but Jimmy has positioned himself well after the couple of crucial missed turns there. The only hope I really have left now is a surprise. I think we all know he's got Focus Blast. It's the only way for him to hit Guzzlord hard, of course, and he's going to go for it onto Rotom. Blizzard actually doesn't KO, which really sucks. It really sucks. But I don't want to rely on 2 misses from him, even if 1 is likely. Sucker Punch? That's kind of cute, especially since it does, after that Sucker Punch hits, it's going to do, what, about half its remaining health? And Maybe. Let's find out how much this does do. 45 out of 46. Focus Blast misses. Hang on a second. We've got a little bit going on here, and because it did miss, we've actually got a nice little follow-up play here, too. We know he goes into Decidueye. That makes a lot of sense. And we actually double out into the Aerodactyl ourselves in the last turn, although, of terrain. Yeah, it being the last turn of terrain is a pretty big deal. Goes Decidueye, I wanted to swap into this. That was easy. That was a good play. That was honestly pretty nice. However, with Pincurchin still alive, that's just going to go down next. And then Raichu, of course, will have the easiest surf of its career. That, of course, just makes a lot of sense, too. Now it's just down to Rotom versus the Raichu and the Decidueye. We have a little bit of a decision to make here. Rotom against Decidueye, it's pretty simple. The only way I win is if I Blizzard and hit after Focus Blast misses, and then Shadow Sneak doesn't do enough to KO me while Blizzard does. That said, I do respect Jimmy a little too much for him to allow that to happen. He's played this whole game a specific way, which is to play very safely to this particular endgame. He's sacrificed multiple ones to make sure Electric Terrain is up for the right amount of time. He's sacrificed a lot to make sure he wins because, as I said about 23 turns ago, it was already pretty much over. And all the rest of this has been posturing and positioning. Even with the missed Focus Blast into Sucker Punch, we've seen him make the proper and good switches to go around. I respect him a little too much for this to happen. Yes, Blizzard was the way that I won, but Sucker Punch lowers the differential by 1 as he confirms he did go for the safe guaranteed victory with Surf into Shadow Sneak. Decidueye didn't even need to click Shadow Sneak as Sucker Punch does a pitiful amount of damage and super effective damage even from Sucker Punch. It's just not enough. Rotom will go down to the much more standard Leaf Blade, and that will finish off the 1-0 loss to the Noctowls. Great game to Jimmy, our second loss of the season for the Bouffalant, and finally a victory for him over the Bouffalant in the regular season. Very well played from Jimmy, very well played, and the strength of the team cannot be understated. So, the retrospective. We all know this was coming after a loss. In addition to a couple questionable team-building decisions, there were 3 main points in which my game floundered, revolving around the Noivern and, of course, the setup of Electric Terrain. The first, more obvious one was my calc about specs being wrong. That was a pretty inexcusable mistake. That's just bad on me. I could have saved the Marowak for later shenanigans, especially bringing it in against Aromatisse and Pincurchin endgame. Could you imagine still having Marowak at the end there? I could have easily brought it in on Mudstale and clicked DQ or sub. Same with Aromatisse, who definitely had physical bulk, but not much. A lot more special bulk, actually, and not much in the way of attacks, such that EQ would have been a 2-hit KO on that as well. Rotom-Frost Volt Switch was an excellent way to bring it in, too, as was Mesprit's U-turn, and if I could toss in a knockoff to catch the band on Decidueye, or just 2-hit KO with Earthquake, man, that Marowak going down early was a big mistake, that's for sure. The second was the burn on Steelix. It was a tough risk to ask for, but I didn't really have anything I wanted to let take that strong fire move and get burned. We saw how important Aerodactyl and Guzzlord were late game. Even if Guzzlord was the call, my other mistake was not having Heavy Slam on it, which ultimately led to the decision to stay in with Steelix and claim the KO at the cost of the game. That burn was seriously impactful, and not only keeping Noivern alive there for future pressure, but more importantly negating the leftovers recovery. I don't exactly have much recovery on my overall roster, and without Heal Bell either, it's pretty rough trying to overcome a 10% burn chance. Even taking into consideration the Scald and 2 other flamethrowers eaten by Arrow, the odds were still just over 50% that I wouldn't have gotten burned from any of those moves. But unfortunately, that's not how it worked out. Saving Steelix would have been amazing. It would have forced a tough lock-in from Decidueye or Raichu to come in to deal with it. Maybe even getting him to use the risky Focus Blast, though of course he had Surf. Now, what if I had switched into Guzzlord? Guzzy got 3 KOs, yes, but would it still have been more valuable to keep Steelix unburned and full health? Perhaps, but it would have been super risky and forced me to make several doubles out of Guzzlord, I think. Guzzlord would invite in both Noivern and Aromatisse, though Noivern couldn't switch in for free because it was so low and Dragon coverage would have KO'd him. Doubling out of Guzzlord into that Steelix would probably have been necessary, as would have been landing more Toxics and getting Aromatisse into range of Aerodactyl. That would have probably needed to happen too. Ultimately, that Electric Terrain boosted Raichu would have been very tough to deal with, but you know what survives a hit? Sturdy Steelix does, and while burned, and more importantly after taking a flamethrower, there was no way it could do that. Not identifying the specs earlier and losing another switch-in offensive threat in Marowak was probably more costly than anything, but if you want to go even further, running the slow Mesprit and losing damage on Decidueye as well as not putting Heavy Slam on Guzzlord may have also been contributing factors. Imagine that Mesprit Ice Beam damage on Decidueye. Does Sucker Punch become a roll? Maybe. Would have been pretty close, I'll tell you that much. Though we could have played around that end game as well. What if I had Heavy Slam on Guzzlord? I'd become less scared of bringing it in against a locked Noivern or something else. Knockoff limits Aromatisse's survivability, or maybe knocks it out with Heavy Slam if I had that, and we waste a lot less time dancing around it. Would the game have opened up from there too? Man, I just wish I'd gotten the chance to show how much Marowak could do in this matchup. That's my bad. I wonder if we get another chance in the playoffs. And finally, I promised I'd mention the consequences of not clicking EQ on Pincurchin after getting burned. Frankly, this looks like a real big risk from the Noctowls, and quite honestly, a misplay as letting it go down at this point may have cost them the game. This was actually the opportunity, I think, to have grabbed the game right back after a bad misplay, but I didn't do it. Okay, let's say I EQ'd the Pincurchin and went down, right? 4 turns of terrain left. Let's say Raichu comes in because it wants to take advantage of those turns, it has Surf, whatever. I protect on the Raichu. Worst case scenario, it nasty plots, which it does actually have. Worst case scenario. I will have to sack at least one Mon. Probably would have gone to Guzzlord to force him to hit a Focus Blast, but maybe he Surfs instead. If he did hit a Focus Blast and KO'd after doing a bit with Surf or something, I go back into Steelix for one more Protect, and then I faint. But then, I actually have the 2 fastest Mons for the rest of the match. Aerodactyl comes in to click Earthquake on the 70% Raichu, and then we're kind of down to breaking through the Mudsdale Aromatisse defensive pair, which we've already been working on all game. One going down, opening up Rotom as well, and making sure Decidueye can't sweep with Banded Shadow Sneak. If that's the concern, I could have decided to even sack Aerodactyl instead potentially, though with Guzzlord unable to beat Aromatisse, that's more likely what I've chosen, especially with Aerodactyl's better accuracy compared to Rotom. It would have become an entirely different game because, as I pointed out in Week 2's loss, I would have gotten rid of the first of the 5-turn condition that did not allow me to outspeed what I needed to. This game in combination with that one has opened my eyes a little bit about how I'm lacking some of those extra tricks. Well, I did bring Trick Room, but in retrospect it wasn't the best idea against a Pincurchin, even less with Aromatisse coming in Mudsdale as well. That could help me against those ridiculous techniques. In this case, my last Mon could stall an Electric Terrain turn. Well, that was Steelix, so the ability to swap him in and click Protect on Electric Terrain turns would have been amazing had I been able to get rid of Pincurchin. Yes, I did have the ability to stall it out later. I just didn't think well enough about that possibility, as clicking EQ that turn would have let me force 2 bad turns out of Raichu under Electric Terrain. And even better, I could have simply EQ'd the Raichu again instead of protecting the same turn, as Guzzlord's Tropical Berry could have allowed it to survive the Focus Blast if I only didn't allow him to set up a nasty plot. Heck, even then I may be able to tank it depending on investment. I just need to force Raichu out and let Guzzlord take over a little bit. Instead, I made the same mistake I did Week 2, worrying about the timing of when the condition would go up or down instead of taking out the Initiator when I came in. It is, I think, very much different from the circumstances of Week 2, very different, and this wasn't nearly as big an offense as in Week 2, I would say, but definitely symptomatic of the same flawed line of thinking. Honestly, we both played, even with me pointing out multiple flaws from both sides, we both played extremely freaking well, and other than those few things, it would have taken this kind of deep dive to even see those mistakes in the first place. I'm sure Elfhouse has a couple things he'd like to do better as well, but it comes down to who makes fewer mistakes, and in this one, I ended up losing. Going over usefulness for the team, it sucks I let down Marowak early. That really sucked. It could have maybe broken the hole that I needed, and it's a shame Aromatisse came, rendering the Trick Room strat dead and Mesprit pretty much ineffective. Steelix was primed for MVP before getting burned, but still may get it for how much work it still put in. It's just that it could have potentially won the game with very little help otherwise. Guzzlord got 3 KOs, but was unfortunately a little too far into garbage time for my liking. Same goes with Arrow's usefulness past tanking flamethrowers, and Rotom's trickiness and power were mostly in garbage time as well. Yeah, I think Steelix does deserve it for putting in so much of the early game on its back, and almost taking care of that Noivern too. If it weren't for the burn, it would have been extremely obvious, but even with it, I cannot deny how much work it put in this battle. That's going to do it for this week. After 6 weeks, we are 4-2 with a plus 13 differential. Remember, both of our losses were a 2-0 and a 1-0, so we're doing pretty well there. We're actually tied with 3 other teams for a total record of 4-2, but we're well ahead of 2 of them by differential, landing us in the 3rd seed at this time. We've got another tough match coming, the 4-2 Summit County Psyducks. The coach's record against me is similar to their season so far. Stellar at first, but getting progressively worse. We've been playing him well recently. Let's see if that success can carry us through to a strong end to the season. See ya.